Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Child Anxiety FAQ podcast. FAQ stands for Frequently Asked Questions, and I'm answering your questions about child and teen anxiety. My name is Dawn Friedman, and I've been working with kids and families for more than 3 decades as a preschool teacher, parent educator, family case manager, clinical counselor, and now at Child Anxiety Support, where I help parents of anxious kids and teens. And this week's question is, how do I deal with my anger towards my anxious child? I want to thank the person who submitted this question, and they did include some details that aren't really relevant to the question, but I wanted you to know, you who submitted, my heart goes out to you. I have so much appreciation for you. So many of us get angry with our anxious children and we feel ashamed of it, or we double down and get defensive and explain why it's our kid's fault. And here in this question, in the email that you gave to me, you offered insight into yourself, in your understanding that this is your responsibility to take care of, and forgiveness in your willingness to bring it to this forum where we can talk about it. And I so appreciate that. I know you are speaking for lots of parents out there. One of the things I wanted you all to know is that anger is often a form of anxiety. Let's talk about that more. It is likely that some of your anger has to do with catching your child's anxiety. Remember, anxiety is catching. In fact, one way I know that I am starting to get anxious is I start to get annoyed, which is the beginning of anger. As you think about getting angry with your anxious child, I want you to think about the possibility that this could be you catching your child's anxiety. And when I offer that to you, does it change how you feel about the anger? Does it give you more room to work with it? In other words, does saying this is anxiety give yourself some room to work with it better? So you don't have to say, what's wrong with me that I'm getting angry with my child, or what's wrong with my child that they're making me angry, but instead, oh, this is anxiety. This is anxiety showing up for our family, and it's part of understanding how we are going to disrupt and take care of the pattern we are passing back and forth. We know from research that irritability can be a sign of anxiety. Irritability is kind of a character trait, it's kind of a temperament trait. Some of us are more irritable than others. We are more intense in our feelings, we're more negative in our feelings, and that comes out as irritability. Lots of us, when we're feeling anxious, get annoyed with things. We get annoyed with people doing things, quote, wrong, unquote. We get upset that things are starting to feel out of our control. We may feel that irritability rise when we are trying to make plans or carry out plans and things are getting in our way. Control is always about anxiety. It's about trying to control the uncontrollable, trying to force systems onto chaos. Again, when you think about control, when you think about trying to manage things or handle things, when you think about your frustration when you're unable to do this, if you see it through the lens of anxiety, does it make you think about it differently? Remember, anxiety is a liar. So when your anxiety is saying, we have to do things this certain way, this is anxiety lying to you that there is literally only one right way instead of lots of pretty good enough ways. When you think of it as anxiety, it also belongs to you. When your child's anxiety is revving up and you find yourself getting angry with them, think to yourself, is this anxiety? And if it is, how can I take responsibility for it? How can I talk back to the anxiety? An example might be your child is revving up in the morning. They don't want to go to school for whatever reason. And you're starting to get angry because you've got to be out the door. You've got other kids to take care of. You have places you got to be, people you got to meet, all of the things. And your child is making this difficult. Now let's think about it through the lens of your anxiety. You're not just angry that your child is getting in the way, your child is unwilling to work with you, your child is melting down. I mean, sure, there's anger, but also some anxiety about what happens if my kid never gets it together? What happens if they make my other kids late? What is the teacher going to think? What is the school going to think? What is my boss going to think? Those are all real concerns, but in this moment, just stop and recognize that the job here is not trying to make a thing happen. The job here is to take care of the anxiety, and that's something different. And the first job is not to take care of your child's anxiety, it's to take care of your own. So that means, how can you get some space? Do you need to get away from your child for a minute so you can stop catching their feeling? For me, that is often the first thing I need to do, is somehow create some space between me and the person whose anxiety I'm catching. So let's say here in my clinical practice, often I'm working with an anxious client, and often I'm catching their anxiety. And when they're telling me how terrible things are, how bad things are, how I need to fix it, they're here, they're asking for help, and I start revving up. Obviously, I can't leave the room. Obviously, I can't say session's over, goodbye. But what I can do is stop. I can just stop and say, I need a minute to think about this. Let me think about this. I can model by calming myself down. A client's coming at me and I say, what you're saying, I want to take it really seriously. So just let me take a minute so that I can think about what it is that I want to say, or what it is that I'm not hearing. So I model that for them, that it's okay to stop and take a minute. When I take people seriously, sometimes I need to take a minute so I can give them the attention they deserve. If I'm not able to do that in the moment, I tell them that. Hold on a second, slow down. I need to think a minute. And then I might take a breath. I might look up and look away from them, focus on something different. I show them, I am thinking, I am here with you. I'm taking this seriously, but just give me a minute. And then I can come back. And very often, just that space that I've taken, that psychic space, that deep breath, that moving my eyes elsewhere, I can come back and say, okay, here is my question. Here are my thoughts. Here is my reflection back to you. Here is the validation I have to offer you. It's usually not starting in with problem solving or instructions. They're still agitated. They need to somehow find their way to a space that they're going to even be open to that. And I can't drag them to that space. I can't even lead them to that space. All I can do is open the space and say, you're welcome to join me. That's not direction. That's not advice. That's usually reflection back. I can see how overwhelmed you are. Even, man, I was really catching your overwhelm, and I can appreciate how much you are juggling right now. Let's just give some space. And then I can reflect that back to them. Let's just sit here for a minute. This is so much. Let's just give ourselves this minute. We can do that with our kids too. I hear you. This is so scary for you. Let's just give ourselves a minute. Let's just stop for a minute. When it comes to being late for work or for school or whatever, sometimes there is 10 seconds where we can just stop when we look at it objectively. If there's not, kids really do have to get on the school. Sometimes we just have to plow through it. And sometimes that means we're going to be angry. We're going to leave the interaction angry. They're going to be angry with us. We're going to be angry at them. We drop them off at school. They're still crying. We drop them off at school. We're still crying. We have to allow ourselves forgiveness there too. Sometimes there's not time to do things beautifully. Sometimes when we feel guilty, we hold on to our anger as a kind of defense mechanism. Well, maybe I shouldn't have yelled, but maybe they shouldn't have been so terrible. Yeah, maybe they shouldn't have been terrible. Maybe you shouldn't have yelled. Maybe we all deserve forgiveness. Maybe we deserve some space, if not in that moment, then with ourselves after the moment, so that we can come back to it. We talk a lot about rupture and repair. Rupture is inevitable. We're going to have conflicts with the people that we love. That is going to happen. But how do we repair it? How do we come back together? How do we move forward? That's by taking responsibility. and forgiveness, not just for our kids, but for ourselves. I see a lot of the times where loving, wonderfully attuned parents will offer so many apologies to their children, but not to themselves. So they apologize to their child. I'm so sorry I yelled. I shouldn't have yelled. But what about forgiveness for yourself? Parents are going to yell. Sometimes that's going to happen. Sometimes we're going to cross a line. I'm not saying make a habit of it, but I am saying it is part of a relationship with humans that sometimes we are not as lovely as we meant to be. I hope this gives you the offering to think about anger as part of your anxiety, to understand that some of us, those of us who are irritable in our anxiety, it's kind of natural. It's what happens so that we can allow ourselves forgiveness. And the interesting thing about forgiveness is when we accept that part of ourselves, then we're able to grow because when we take responsibility for it, you know what? I get angry. I think it's pretty natural for me to get angry, and I want to do better. It's the and, right? I forgive myself, I appreciate I do this, and I want to get better. But first, we have to not beat ourselves up about it. So I hope that you can not beat yourself up about it. And if you have other questions about anger and anxiety, please send me a message, send me an email, dawn@childanxietysupport.com, or go to my website, childanxietysupport.com/podcast, and send your question to me there.